So when I'm entering into a space of humbling my soul, what is really God after? You see, God isn't humbling you through the fast, but you are humbling yourself by choosing to fast. I hope you understand the difference. God isn't humbling you through the fast, but you are humbling yourself by choosing to fast. And that's why the scripture says over and over again that humble yourself before God, and he will exalt you. Not God humble me, then exalt me. So you humbling yourself is where God can begin to see that you are aiming really to please him. So and that's why fasting is always pointed to the intent to honor and to please God with a dedicated and focused heart on God. And the most important part of that is really that we are trying really to please God. Because as I said, fasting is always pointed to the intent to honor and to please God with a dedicated and focused heart on your God. And as I said, the most important part really is we are trying really to please God through our humbling of our soul and our fasting. But pleasing God, why is this concept connected to fasting? In the book of Romans, chapter number 12, verse number 1 and verse number 2. Romans chapter number 12, verse number 1 and verse number 2. Romans chapter 12, verse number 1 and verse number 2. And I don't have it on my slide. It says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God. He says, which is your reasonable service. He says, and be not conformed to this world, but be transformed, he says, by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Notice the modifiers in verse number 2. He says, by renewing of your mind, he says that we may prove, he says, what is good, acceptable. Some translations will say, well, pleasing. And he says, the perfect will of God. So if fasting then is pointed to the purpose of fasting is to honor God, then really I want to dedicate myself to you with a focused heart. Then I'm saying, God, that I want you to be pleased instead of me pleasing my flesh. And that's what we're really trying to do. We're really trying to please God instead of me trying to please the flesh. So our challenge in fasting is many times we lift up how desperately that we want to please the flesh. I think somebody has a question they want to ask. Not sure. I can't see my screen, so if you want to ask or make a comment, you can go ahead. I was hearing something. Oh. That's it. Right, so if you do have a comment, you can go ahead and and say. If not, I'll go ahead. because I can't see the hands because of my screen being shared. Okay. So hungering. So our challenge in fasting, as I said, is that many times you end up lifting up how desperately you want to please your flesh. Why? Because the hunger and the taste is aimed at the flesh and not faith. You know, the first part as you go through the humbling of your soul or fasting, you get the hunger pains, gas pains, growling of the stomach, headaches, the wrestling match, as some people say. It's showing you really how loud your flesh is and how quiet the voice of God is. So to repeat that again, when we actually initially go through the period of fasting, remember it's a war that we are facing, a war that we are fighting, the flesh against the spirit. And the flesh always tries to show how strong he is. Because when you're fasting, the first few days of the hours, sometimes you get headaches, you get the gas pains, you get the growling of the stomach. And really it's a wrestling match because the flesh is showing you how loud he is and how quiet the voice of God is. But the more I humble my soul, the louder God will become. The more profound his voice will be. The more clear his presence will be. And the quieter my flesh would be. You notice I'm calling it not part of the screen. I'll have to give it to you next week because I don't have it on my slide. Right? So that's why you're not seeing anything.